Can we have the other slideshow? I want to pull together some of the things that both Mark and David have been talking about here. One of the most interesting things about the case of Troy Davis was that he fit into the construct of this, again, the white victim and the black perpetrator. That has been the formula, if you will, for the death penalty in so many cases. There's 6 times the likelihood of a death penalty if the victim is white and the offender is black than if they're the same race, in either race. There we go. In the crime media business, which is a $4 billion a year business, people are, in general, using the crime media business, if you will, is taking the news and making it, whether it's Greta Van Susteren, whether it's Nancy Grace, it is taking the lowest possible brow, if you will, and making it 24-hour news. It's very cheap to produce. It's very, it compels people and it frightens people. And the implicit bias that was against Troy Davis is kind of standard fare. The crime media business is owned by the media businesses, which own about 90% of current traditional media. So, in other words, the 10% of media that is free of this is mostly in the internet, mostly in new media. In the case, most death penalty crimes also have overwhelmingly white juries with an assumption that minorities are going to be anti-death penalty. If the race of jury has 5 or more white males, there is a 70% chance of a death penalty. And if there are 4 or fewer, there are 40%. It's a huge, whopping 30% difference with 1 person change on that jury. The notion that minorities are going to hesitate, are going to question that, that sentence because of their own experience with law enforcement. White juries tend to believe that police and justice systems are fair, are impartial, and that judges have an impartial stance when judges in general are elected, and that notion of being tough on crime all the way to the death penalty is essential for these judges to keep their jobs. While murder is reported the most, it is the crime that is committed the least. In Troy Davis's case, there were some exceptions. Both the jury and the final parole board were made up of a mixed race, and it was an unusual outcome in that situation. So was Troy Davis a cop killer or an innocent man, or neither of the above? His execution was set against overwhelming doubt, including the 7 recanting witnesses. Several Supreme Court cases have tried to deal with racism in the death penalty and have essentially, according to every study, failed to be able to deal with that effectively. We think of the death penalty as the case for the worst of the worst. This is not a garden variety murder, but a horrific murder that would allow for the death penalty. But when we look at who's executed, it's not the worst of the worst. It's the guy who has the bad lawyer, who didn't understand the legal system, and especially whose victims are white. Digital advocacy and social media informatics plays a crucial role in bringing the Davis case back to the public eye and for organizing many of the national and international efforts there were to save Troy Davis. And the notion of the new media coming in and taking an activist stance is really an important thing to look at, whether or not new media should be journalistically sound and quote-unquote fair and balanced, like Fox Opinion, Fox News. The story of the internet efforts to save Troy Davis literally bound into the millions of people. But how committed were those people to the real effort of saving the real life? This is one of those cases where it's very hard to tell. It's one thing to click and put a petition in. It's another thing to go and stand where there is an execution taking place. So hope was given to many by this new technology, and the idea that it was going to be a road to democratic ideals was one of the most important things that happened. As we know, with Arab Spring, we think of new media, we think of the internet as fostering democratic ideals. We look at what happened with Arab Spring and we go, aha, it really did foster democratic ideals. We were able to topple governments by working through new media and the power of people gathering. But in the case of Troy Davis, in the case of the human rights here at home, in the case of overwhelming doubt as to the validity of the original conclusion that Troy Davis was in fact guilty of this crime, the new technology failed, and failed miserably, to help us save Troy Davis. Thank you very much. We're open to questions.